Welcome back. I'm Jill with the carefreekitchen.com, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make an oven roasted turkey breast. And this is the perfect solution if you don't want to hassle with a big turkey or if you're feeding a smaller crowd this holiday season. Okay, so this is what you're going to need for this recipe. So here is my turkey breast, and you'll need between 3 and 4 pounds, but even if it's a little bit bigger or smaller, that will be fine too. And then I have some salt and pepper, some minced garlic. I'm going to use a little bit of onion powder. I have some herbs here. I have some rosemary and some thyme, and I don't have any fresh sage on hand, so I'm going to use just some ground sage, and then onions and carrots, and then some room temperature butter. Before we get started, let's turn our oven on 350 degrees, and we'll get that preheated. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is mix up the mixture that we're going to put on top of the turkey breast. I'm just going to unwrap my butter here, and I just need like 6 tablespoons. So I'm going to cut off a couple tablespoons here. We'll just save that for later. And then I'm going to put this into my bowl. Cut it in some smaller chunks here. There we go. Okay. And then for my herbs, this is my thyme, and I'm just going to start at the tip of the little sprig of thyme, and then I will just pull the leaves off like this. You don't want the woody stem part, just the really tender leaves. And we're going to need about 2 teaspoons of this. So you can just kind of estimate here. And I feel like the really big difference in this recipe is the fresh herbs. It gives it a ton of flavor. This thyme is a little bit mature, so it does have a few seed pods on it, so if you can discard those. And then I'll just take a little knife. We're just going to go ahead and finely chop this. And then I will just pick this up, put it right into my bowl. Okay, and now the next thing I need is some rosemary. And again, I'm just using the little leaves. And then run a knife through it here. And again, a couple teaspoons of this too. Okay, and then into this same bowl, I'm going to add a teaspoon of onion powder and about a half a teaspoon of pepper. And then I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of garlic, and just some minced garlic is great. You can mince your own, or you can just use the stuff that's pre-made. And now I'll just use the spoon here, and I'm going to mix this up. Just use the back of your spoon to get it all combined. Okay, it should look something like this when it's done. And I forgot my sage. It calls for about a teaspoon of sage, but that would be fresh sage, and dried stuff is more potent. So I'm just gonna add about a half a teaspoon of dried sage to my butter mixture, and then mix that again. Sage is really a great pairing with turkey breast. I just love the flavor of the sage and the rosemary and the thyme all mixed together. It's amazing. Okay, so we'll set that aside. And the next thing I'm gonna do is prepare my carrots. I like to do some carrots in this recipe. For one, it makes the gravy really sweet. And then also, there's always a few people who really like the cooked carrots. So I'm just gonna do a quick peel. They don't really need to be peeled, but I think that it actually just looks prettier when you cook it. So whatever you wanna do there is great. Okay, and then I'm just gonna cut it in kind of bigger pieces here. It's gonna be roasting with the turkey breast, so some big chunks are great. The recipe calls for a couple of medium onions, and since this is a huge onion, I'm just going to use 1. Okay, and then I'll give this just like a quick little, you know, roughly the same size as the carrots are great. There we go. Okay, and then for the turkey breast, I'm just using a glass 9 by 13 baking dish, and I'm just going to open this here. Usually when you buy these, they are frozen. So I've just let mine sit in the fridge for a couple days and it's nice and thawed. So inside this, you are also going to have a little bag of gravy, and you can just save that for later and put it into your gravy if you'd like. Okay, and we're gonna keep it in this same shape. We just don't want this mesh on it. And now, we are just going to tuck in any little ends that we need to. Okay, and now I'm just gonna use a paper towel, and I want the top to be kind of dry. And if there is a big piece of fat on top, I'm actually gonna take some of that off. It's okay to have some skin on there, but that looks better. Okay, and now I'm just going to salt this pretty generously on top. Okay, and then I'm going to put my butter on top. Okay, and then I'm just going to use my hands, and you can put some gloves on if you want, but we'll kind of just spread this around evenly. And if you can get a little bit on the sides, that's great too. There we go. Let's spread that out. All right, and now, of course, wash my hands again. Okay, now I'm going to just set this aside a little bit, and I will use my same bowl here. And I'm just gonna add my veggies to it. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of avocado oil. I just wanna lightly coat these vegetables. I'm gonna lightly coat them in avocado oil, and then a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. There we go. And I also wanna add maybe about a teaspoon of garlic to that as well. And then just give this a nice toss here. To finish this off, I'm just going to add my vegetables. You can add some potatoes here too. I actually don't have a big enough pan for that because this is a pretty big turkey breast, but you can definitely add some potatoes to this as well. You don't want the vegetables to be on top. You just want them to be around the sides and kind of dispersed evenly. Okay, so now we're gonna bake this in a preheated oven. We wanna bake it on 350 degrees, and we're gonna be cooking it for probably 75 to 90 minutes, depending on how big your turkey breast is. The best way to know if it's done is if you use an internal thermometer, a digital one, and the inside of the turkey needs to be 165 degrees. But you can stop cooking it, you can take it out of the oven when it's about 162 or so, because then it will rise a little bit after you take it out of the oven. So watch that pretty closely, and that's the best way to get really tender and juicy turkey breast. Okay, I just pulled this out of the oven for just a minute here. As you can see, we've got a little patch right here that is starting to get crusty brown. That's what we want all over the whole thing. I am going to use my digital thermometer here and see what the temperature is on the thickest part of the breast. Okay, it's about 152, so it's not quite ready to be done yet. But since this is a little bit brown right here, I am going to take a little piece of tin foil, and sometimes this happens if there's a high spot, and we'll just loosely cover that and then put it back in the oven for probably about 15 to 20 more minutes. All right, so I actually just took this out of the oven, and it's done inside. I've checked the temperature in a couple different places. However, the top is not quite crusty enough, so I'm gonna put it back into the oven on broil and watch it really close so that I can get a nice golden color on the rest of it. So I'll just keep this little guy on here for a minute while I broil the rest and get a nice even color around the outside. All right, check out that herb crusted topping. So beautiful and delicious. The carrots are cooked to perfection. All right, and now we're gonna cut into this and see what it looks like inside. It is so tender and so juicy, and that herb crust on top has so much flavor. Okay, so now that you have your turkey breast done, this is how you make a really easy gravy recipe. Here are my gravy drippings. This makes the most amazing gravy. Okay, so I am just going to pour this in here, and you really don't need to strain it. You can just get all of that amazing juice into your blender. And then I like to get a little bit of onion. So if I was to estimate, maybe like 1/4 of a cup of onion or so, 1/3 of a cup of onion, because adding a little bit of onion gives it like some amazing flavor. Okay, and then into my blender. Right now, I only have about 1.5 cups of liquid. So I'm just gonna use some regular chicken stock, and you can use the Better Than Bouillon base and add that to some water, or you can use this. And if I was gonna estimate, my turkey will probably feed 8 to 9 people. So I wanna have like a few cups of gravy at least. So I'm gonna fill this up to the 3-cup line. And that should give me plenty of gravy for everybody. All right, and then we're gonna pop that on the blender and then just blend it on low. And then turn it up a little bit. Because I wanna be sure that all of that onion is mixed in. So that looks great. Okay, and then for the gravy, we're just gonna pour the drippings along with the broth into the pan. This is actually a good time to taste it before it gets too hot. Maybe warm it up a little bit and then take a taste. This one does need a little bit more salt, and I'll put about 1/2 teaspoon in. Try that first, and then we'll see what it tastes like. But the gravy that I like has a little bit of sweetness, and that's what you get from the onion. And then it has all that garlic flavoring from the herb crusted top. But if you do like just a little bit more tang to your gravy, then you're gonna wanna add a little bit more garlic. So, check the salt first. If it needs a little bit of tang, you're gonna use garlic. If it needs a little bit more sweetness, you're gonna use onion powder. And a little bit more kick, you're gonna add just a little bit of black pepper. All right, and I like just a little bit of black pepper here. Okay, so to thicken your gravy, you want to bring your broth up to a boil. And then I have just a little bit of water in this dish here, and I have about 1/4 of a cup. And to that, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of cornstarch. And then just use your spoon here. You always add it to cold water. We're going to mix this until there are no chunks. And then as you are whisking your broth, we can pour in our cornstarch. And this will thicken your gravy. So we're just gonna continue to bring it back up to a boil. And as you can see, this is getting thicker already. You can do another maybe 3 tablespoons of water and a tablespoon of cornstarch again if it's not thick enough for you. But do remember that it thickens a little bit as it cools. So to me, that actually looks pretty good. You just want to be sure you boil it for about a minute after you add that cornstarch. All right, as you can see, that's pretty thick. You want it to kind of thickly coat the spoon. So that's gonna cool down a little bit, and it'll thicken just a little bit more as it cools. All right guys, here is my recipe for the best turkey breast recipe. And if you're wanting to wow your family and friends this holiday season, this is a recipe for you. It only takes about 1.5 hours to cook. It's super easy, the cleanup is easy, and you don't have to hassle with an entire bird. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, there is a clickable recipe on my website at thecarefreekitchen.com. You can just search in turkey breast and this one will come up. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.